Secondly, we have to be honest about the nature of the academic profession. And that's ugly and difficult. The academic profession is a pyramid. And in its pyramidal structure, it resembles a great many other professions. You could think of orchestral music. You could think of professional football. It takes a great many high school football players to produce a single NFL athlete who is going to have a professional career. And the academic profession, though the rewards are considerably less and the physical toll considerably smaller, works exactly the same way. We need to have a lot of people taking history courses to produce a small number of graduate students. We need a lot of graduate students to produce the smaller number of people who are going to reproduce the careers of their teachers, and the even smaller number of people who will actually end up at one of the 133 universities that produce 80% of our PhDs. We need to make those facts evident to everybody who enters the academic profession. You don't really hear people complaining that symphonic orchestras don't accept every talented musician. We need to make clear that we're in the same position. But like the symphonic orchestras, we have to make clear that we do things fairly. Cecilia Rouse and Claudia Golden showed that once auditions for symphonic orchestras began to be performed behind curtains, women went from having no positions in orchestras to dominating some sections of them, as they now dominate the string sections of our major orchestras. We need to be sure that we're fair, and it's really hard to do a teaching audition behind a screen, so this is going to take some thought. Third, this is a really tough one. We have to insist that what we do isn't silly, isn't faddish, isn't trendy, that we have not thrown all the babies out with the bathwater. To read the attacks on humanities in the university is to read single sentences which dismiss everything we do. So Aristotle was thrown out and replaced by Althusser, and Dickens with Derrida. That's all that Hacker and Dreyfus say about the humanities, teaching the humanities in the United States. This is not true. At the level of our research, the humanities is a set of rigorous, powerful disciplines that do their best to find out the truth as far as we can find it about important objects. Professors are very reluctant to make that kind of claim now, so let me read a version of the claim made by a fictional professor, A.E. Housman, the great poet and professor of classics, in Tom Stoppard's play, The Invention of Love. Scholarship is where we're nearest to our humanness, useless knowledge for its own sake. Useful knowledge is good too, but that's for the faint-hearted, an elaboration of the real thing, which is only to shine some light. It doesn't matter on what, it's the light against the darkness, it's what's left of God's purpose when you take away God. Something like that has to be the motto that we follow, and I think it is the motto that guides our practice day in and day out as scholars. We need also to point out that humanistic scholarship has a civic side, that historical and literary and musical and artistic scholarship does contribute to our society. I don't know how many of you followed the controversy that blew up when it turned out that last month the state of Virginia had introduced a new 4th grade history textbook written by one Joy Massoff, author of Oh Yuck, the Encyclopedia of Everything Nasty, and Oh Yikes, History's Grossest Moments. Joy Massoff told the 4th graders of Virginia that between 60 and 70,000 African Americans fought voluntarily for the Confederacy, 2 entire regiments of them under the leadership of Stonewall Jackson. Happily, a professor, a historian at the College of William and Mary, Carol Sheriff, had a daughter in the 4th grade and read her daughter's textbook and brought this extraordinary falsification of history to public notice. Ms. Massoff argued that she had found her information on the web, and indeed she had in sites maintained by the Sons of Confederate Veterans. And happily, many historians joined Carol Sheriff in denouncing this. And in this case, they took the journalists with them. The Washington Post, which is very influential in Virginia, though a fairly conservative paper these days, unequivocally sided with the historians. Humanities and humanists are civic enterprises. And you can enlarge the little story I've just told you by thinking about the Park Service's Civil War sites and Southern sites. Over the last quarter century, they've been the object of a quiet revolution. When I was a child, they didn't refer to the presence of black people as part of the cause of the Civil War or part of the working substance of places like Monticello. Now I have African American friends who as children weren't taken to Civil War battlefields and other Park Service sites because their parents were so offended by this, and who now joyfully take their children because the Park Service historians, working with university historians, have transformed these sites to tell the story we would now tell in our scholarship and in our classrooms. This is a great civic service, but it's never brought out into public, and this kind of civic service has to be brought out again and again and again. Finally, the hardest of all, we have to make clear what we do when we teach. And it's really hard to do that, and I speak as a historian who's worked a lot on education and tried to reconstruct what went on in past classrooms, which is, it turns out to be very difficult to do. Partly this is nature's way of being kind. I think nature doesn't want us to remember quite all of those hours in rooms with chalk floating in the sunlight. And so, you know, she waves a wand at us when we leave and we forget high school, or at least junior high. So it's a little bit difficult actually to find this out, but it's absolutely essential. I know what I do in class every day, and I'm going briefly to describe one of the courses that I teach, not because it is particularly distinctive, but because things like it go on at every public university and every honors college and every state liberal arts college in this country, as well as at private universities. I have the great good fortune to teach in the course that I would design if I were given the chance to design the course I would want to teach in. As it happens, I didn't design it, but if I had, it would be the course I teach. We offer a course which takes up half of a student's freshman year, 2 courses in the fall, 2 courses in the spring. The students who take this course read a vast range of great texts, starting with the Bible and Homer and ending, a little depressingly, with Nietzsche and Dostoevsky. They hear 3 lectures a week from a staff of people from different disciplines, and the disciplines change from year to year, depending on who is available. If we have an art historian, we use images. If we have a musicologist, we'll bring music, particularly into the second or more modern part of the course. We read no secondary sources. All narrative is provided by the 3 lectures, and we have 3 hour-and-a-half seminars for each student, which each student takes part in which they argue their way through the primary sources. It's a demanding course. It's demanding on the faculty because you have to put down the shield of specialization and teach what you're assigned to teach. That's our principle. I will never forget my dear friend François Rigolot, great elegant Frenchman, great expert on Rabelais, standing up to give the lecture on Goethe's Faust and scratching his head and saying, you know, normally I don't believe there is such a thing as Frenchness. But having reread Goethe's Faust, I will say, this is not French. And then going on to give a marvelous lecture on Goethe's Faust. We teach with a mixed staff of professors and postdoctoral fellows in our Society of Fellows in the Liberal Arts, and we make the fellows in the society teach regardless of their own specialties. So we had one of our best ever teachers in this Western Civ course was a specialist in the history of gender and sexuality in 20th century America. She tells me it's the hardest thing she ever did in her life, but she got the highest ratings in her year, higher, I may say, than mine, for her passionate attack on these texts and her wonderful commitment to the students and the teaching. Research is not irrelevant in a course like this because when you're told 2 weeks in advance that you have to give a lecture on Cicero, as I was, you have skills which you apply. You read the text, but you don't only read the text. I had to teach Cicero's 4 Catilinarian orations. Now, people who have hair of the color of mine will remember them because we ground through them in 3rd-year high school Latin, and we had no idea what they were about. Absolutely none. They were just a set of sentences to translate. It turns out they're fantastically interesting. This is political murder being carried out by a great Republican politician who is subverting the very Constitution he is claiming to support. That's a subject that is always interesting. But to see how that works, you've got to read some Roman law, you've got to read some recent work on oratory in the Roman Republic, you've got to read a recent commentary. So scholarship still counts, even though you're not speaking as a specialist scholar. It's a course that I love teaching in. The students talk about it exuberantly. They say, at the end of the year, we all have the same wounds, and we can compare them. I mean, what it's like to read the Brothers Karamazov in a week, for example. And these students stay together as a kind of discursive community for the rest of their time in Princeton. We can tell, because in Princeton, as in many other American universities, there are 2 rules for undergraduate life. One is real boys or real men don't study the humanities. The other is real women don't talk in class because they won't have a social life. Happily, both of these laws are violated in this course day after day and year after year to everybody's pleasure. It's a course that subverts the social order in a wholly good way. And it's a course in which we read subversive texts. One of my great pleasures is reading the Synoptic Gospels with our students, most of whom have actually never read the Synoptic Gospels in a serious and intensive way, as opposed to hearing chapters from them selected in church. That's a really radical experience. So I think we need to make clear that every good college, every good university, every good community college stages humanistic learning of this kind. We have to tell these stories. We have to make these examples public. We have to show the world that this is what we do when we're at our best and make this a regulative ideal. And this shouldn't be hard because it is what we do every day. And it is what my former students talk about doing at the highly varied places where they teach, which include state liberal arts colleges, private liberal arts colleges, second-tier state universities, flagship universities, private research universities. At all of them, they talk about teaching in these terms. What we're doing, in other words, it seems to me, is something tremendously important. We are maintaining traditions that used to be only for an elite. We're maintaining liberal arts, which in its etymological meaning meant arts for free men, but we're making them accessible to free women. We're making them accessible to people of every color, religion, national origin there is. And we're making them accessible to people who don't come with them partly already mastered to university, as the members of an elite did a generation ago. This is a tremendous democratic accomplishment when we carry it out. Doesn't work all the time. No course works for every student. No pedagogy works for every student. You have to keep reinventing. But I don't know anything else we can do that would do more to show the world that we actually are not vile parasites who have no claim on the world's sustenance. And it seems to me that we would rather not be in that position. Thank you very much.